They say military children are like dandelions. They can put down roots almost anywhere, and they're impossible to destroy. They adapt easily and can survive nearly anywhere.
I'm Maggie Moore. I'm an Air Force brat, and I'm an ROTC cadet at the University of Tennessee. I was born in Nashville when my mom was an instructor for ROTC at Vanderbilt. My dad was actually a reservist at the time, but then following that, we moved to Georgia, and around 5 days into living into Georgia, he got called to duty, and that's when he went to Iraq. We didn't have a house yet. Boxes were still there. We had no furniture. And then while we were in Georgia, my mom got promoted from major to lieutenant colonel. We went from Warner Robins, Georgia to Tampa, Florida. While in Tampa, my mom got deployed to Qatar for 3 months. So halfway through my 5th grade year, we picked up and moved to Oahu, Honolulu. And we were there for 2.5 years, where my mom got promoted to colonel. My dad became active duty once again, working for the Air Force. Then after living in Hawaii for 2.5 years, we moved back to Georgia, the exact same town where I had went to pre-K and kindergarten. Definitely living in Georgia was my favorite, not because it was the best location. Arguably, it was actually the worst. It was in the middle of Georgia, really small town, but it's the only time I've experienced like coming back to roots or like knowing people. After Georgia, we moved to Colorado for 3 years, where I graduated high school from, and my mom was promoted to general. Logistically, it was really difficult, especially with my parents getting divorced, because while we lived in Georgia, my dad lived in Hawaii, so I went back to Hawaii every 8 weeks, and I ended up missing a ton of school. Things were hard logistically when people are in different countries at different times. In Hawaii, I had 5 nannies throughout the span of us living there for 2.5 years. So logistically, it's definitely a challenge. Definitely a persona I had carried around for a long time was, I knew in my head, I'm always going to be the new kid and I'll never know anyone. So I carried the persona. I was like, I'm always gonna have to just be the one to speak up and talk to people, because I will always be the new kid. I will always be the one asking questions, where is this? What do I do? What do we do now? There's definitely a few different kinds of military brats per se. I'd say most military brats are very outgoing and outspoken, but are less prone to talk about their family. They'll talk about the Air Force as a whole and the Navy as a whole, but they won't exactly talk about what their parents are doing or the things they've experienced. So we definitely have a predominantly Air Force family. Both my parents are in the Air Force, but my mom's dad, my grandfather, was in the Navy. He got drafted in World War II. And then my dad's dad, he was in the Air Force, and he was an engineer in the Air Force for 30 years. My dad's the youngest of 6 kids, and a couple of his brothers were also in the Air Force. So it's definitely spread out, but mostly in the Air Force. I have a cousin today that's still in the Air Force. So it's definitely a very big influence in my family.
And together, you'll see him do things that will help change the world, that'll change you. One day, you're gonna look up and be a better you, and this nation will be better for it too.
So the 3 Air Force values are integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. I'd definitely say that it's the base for many of the values in my family. But then on the other hand, I was very much encouraged not to go into the military, especially being younger and maybe being a girl. My family, especially me being a really shy kid, they were very apprehensive of me when I was younger, saying, oh, I think I'm considering doing this. Oh, maybe I want to go into the Air Force. Women in my family, I think, are more expected to play a supportive role, especially when it comes to the military.
I think there's usually 2 assumptions, and it's for boys and then for girls. You're a boy and your dad's in the Air Force. Oh, so you want to join the Air Force. And then if you're a girl, it's, oh, so do you even know what your parents do? I say it all the time. My parents are in the military, and people automatically correct that to, your dad's in the Air Force? Your dad's in the military? And I'm like, no, my mom is active duty in the Air Force. It's always assumed it's the man rather than the woman.
I think that might have been actually the initial reason, especially when I was very younger. I didn't really understand what the military was, but I was told, everyone's in it, everyone loves it, and you can't do it. And not even knowing what I was getting into, I was like, oh, yes, I can. I was like, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to join the Air Force now. I definitely decided to go to Tennessee to try and get back to some roots. A lot of my family still lives in Tennessee. Also, my dad went to Tennessee. He was an ROTC cadet in Tennessee as well. So I was really excited about that, to be able to follow into his footsteps. So I came into ROTC at Tennessee knowing a little bit just because my dad had gone there, and then my mom was a teacher at another school. So I knew a little to expect. Being an ROTC definitely made me buy a planner immediately. It's very busy, and there's a lot of things that aren't exactly planned out, and you just have to have like your schedule open to be able to go at like the drop of a hat if you have meetings. So I said, we only have 2 workouts and then 2 classes, so it seems not that bad, but we do have a lot of outside commitments and opportunities that, though are kind of time consuming, are really interesting and really helpful and things you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. But it's definitely taught me to be less nervous and more confident in myself, because at the very beginning, I hated going to PT because every morning, they line you up and they ask you these questions, and I'd always know the answers, and I'd still always get yelled at because I'd like look down and stutter them, and they'd be like, what? And finally I'd like, you have to say it back, and you have to know, oh, it's this. And so that's definitely helped me, stand up straight, look someone in the eye, and just get it done for sure. The freshman class has it's 30% girls, so it's not as horrible as other schools are, but it is really interesting because it's just been established in like the little community of ROTC that sexism is kind of okay. It's mostly everything's just a joke, everything's just kidding, but it's all still very relevant and real, to the point where I don't really hang out with any boys from ROTC, but when I'm talking, I'm very deliberate what I say, very deliberate in that I'm here for this, I'm here to do this, just like you, and I'm not here just to marry an officer in the Air Force. My mom's the first person to say in the Air Force she hasn't experienced any true sexism and that she's always been found respect, and so it's definitely nice to see in the real Air Force. That's not as much experienced, I think, as it is on college campuses, naturally. It's a really strange feeling, and everyone in my family kind of talks about like getting restless. You're there for a year, and then you're happy you get to say second year, and it's really exciting, and you're putting roots down, and then all of a sudden you're kind of looking around like, okay, what's next? And I've always expected that in my life. Always, when's the next time we're gonna move? There were times where we didn't even unpack some of our furniture if we were only living somewhere for a little bit. So now I'm like, all right, I really need to like dig my heels in and like get comfortable, because I'm not gonna be moving, I'm not gonna be leaving. So it's kind of exciting to look at the opportunity and say, here's 4 years where I know for sure I will be here. Ultimately, I do want to commission as a second lieutenant in the Air Force. That's goal number 1, because that's not guaranteed. That's really difficult to determine. But eventually, I'd like to be in the Air Force and then at some point become a reservist, because I don't want to make the Air Force a career for sure. I don't want to do it for 30 years like both of my parents have. I definitely, want to one day have a family, have kids, things like that. And I'm hoping maybe one day I could have, a law office and be in a city, hopefully like Knoxville or, Franklin, places like that in Tennessee, and just be able to give my kids like a different kind of life than I had, because I really liked moving, but not a lot of people really enjoy that and thrive off of that. And so I just want to be able to be near my family and, take my kids to go see their grandma, my mom, go hang out with my cousins. I'm really hoping to become an attorney and still have the Air Force, still be in the reserves, still participate, just like my dad, who was called to duty out of nowhere. So that's to be expected, but to have like a life and put down roots and things like that for sure. Now that I've been at the University of Tennessee for almost a year, I've really been able to put down some roots. I'm really looking forward to see where the university takes me and where the Air Force takes me in my career.